It's a pleasure having you here with us today for this very exciting keynote. Well, technological advancements and the fast development of artificial intelligence models are an important part of our unstable world. AI is now everywhere. We have in our cell phones, we have in our cars, and everyone wonders if you are indeed blending into machines. Well, but how are religion and AI connected in our contemporary society? To me, it's a pleasure to be here introducing Dr. Beth Singler. Dr. Singler is a digital and cultural anthropologist. She's the research fellow in artificial intelligence at Homerton College, University of Cambridge. She has been an associate fellow at the Leverhulme Center for the Future of Intelligence since 2016. And by employing traditional and digital ethnographic techniques, Dr. Singler explores the social, ethical, philosophical, and religious implications of advances in artificial intelligence and robotics. In 2021, Dr. Singler won the Digital Religion Research Award for the Network for New Media, Religion, and Digital Cultural Studies. In 2017, she won the Arts and Humanities Research Council Best Research Film of the Year with the film Pain in the Machine. Dr. Singler is the author of the book The Indigo Children, New Experimentation with Self and Science, which is an ethnographic monograph on the New Age movement. She's also currently preparing a monograph entitled Religion and AI, Rejection, Adoption, and Adaption. And the Cambridge Companion on the Religion and AI. Today, she'll be speaking about a burning topic, sentient machines and religion. Please feel free to type all your questions as I will be collecting them at the end of the presentation. And the title of Dr. Singler's talk is Lambda, an eschatological and religious hopes of artificial intelligence. Well, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me here to speak to you all. I'm very excited about this opportunity. And now I'm going to struggle with technology and make sure it works for us all. If anyone can't see anything, shout out. Let me know if anything goes wrong, but I will share my slides. I need to get them back to the right point, actually. And I'll just make sure I have to share sound as well for later. Okay. I hope that's all clear. There we go. So we've had the title of my talk today. And I want to talk first about how it relates to the topic of the conference. Artificial intelligence is often described and presented as a force for disruption in society, that it will change things in remarkable ways. So in particular, we get this reference from Klaus Schwab, who was one of the founders of the World Economic Forum, who said that AI would initiate the fourth industrial revolution, that we'd been through various different paradigm shifts through technology before, but this would be the next one coming. Now, there are bold claims about how AI will transform education, medicine, science, transport, employment, etc. And you can see on this infographic that I've added here from someone else that the different areas of human interaction that will be influenced by various different forms of AI. But what's missing here, and which I'm going to talk about more closely today, is the impact on the societal element of religion. It's not normally presented, artificial intelligence, not normally presented as something that has a connection to religion inherently. It's normally described as a product of the modern era, of a secular age, but I want to unpick that. And to start with, I'll be introducing a key distinction that I make when talking about artificial intelligence that's worth bearing in mind. Then I want to separate out the entanglements of religion and AI into how AI is being operationalized in belief in religious systems, in religious institutions, and give some examples of those. And then I'm going to talk about how we actually are exhibiting belief in AI itself as a future potential, as a path that we're on, as a direction that we're traveling in. And that's very dependent, going back to what I say with what is AI, on how we conceive of AI, how we understand it. The definition of belief here I'm using is as an assertion. It's never just an internal disposition, that our beliefs shape how we act, they shape our world, and they make elements of our communities come together. So that reference to Taylor there, that the statement I believe in is only sensible when there are others who do not. It is a means of establishing a community against the world. So everyone who's expressing particular views about AI are coming together in a worldview about what the future is going to look like. And then there will be examples of both implicit and explicit religious assertions about artificial intelligence and how they exist digitally and how they are shared and spread. So that would be the reference to belief in AI. And then at the very end, I'll put up my contact details. If there's any questions that you don't want to share in the chat, if you want to ask me later, I'm happy about that as well. So starting with a particular story that erupted recently that caused a lot of extra work for me in terms of talking to the press about what this means. Very recently, you might have seen this, that a Google engineer, Blake Lemoine, made a claim that Lambda, I have to just move something so I can see my slides a bit better. Lambda, which stands for Language Model for Dialogue Applications, basically an AI chatbot, was itself sentient and able to express thoughts and feelings equivalent to a human child, as seen in this article. And we can suggest that some of the interpretations of AI is that it's going to disrupt the barriers and boundaries around our definitions of what it means to be human. Move this on. This is an example from some of the chatbot text that Lemoine had in interaction with Lambda, and you can see how it's successful in presenting itself as a fluent and loquacious speaker, responds to his questions with responses specifically about consciousness and sentience. What's interesting here, I think, is not necessarily the content and what it says, but our reaction to it. We get a presentation of Lambda as very successful, partly because of the editing that was involved in these small snippets and clips, that actually the PDF of the entire conversation describes how it's been spliced together, sometimes with the order of dialogue altered and with tangents removed when Lambda wasn't successful. So we are giving ourselves a presentation of artificial intelligence. We're telling ourselves stories about what it is and what it could be. And it's interesting to me that Lemoine, who was an engineer at Google and knew the ins and outs of Lambda, knew how all the technology was put together, how the correlations worked in its language system, still managed to fail the Turing test and see it as conscious, sentient, and more than it was. In essence, he's failing what's known as the ex machina Turing test. If you know this film, the argument there is that if an individual could see the inner workings of an AI, a robot, a machine, and still believe it to be a person, then it would really successfully pass the Turing test. So in this instance, Lemoine could see and understand how this technology worked because he was a Google engineer, and he still saw it as sentient. Now, humans actually fail the Turing test all the time. There's been some really great research on how this happens, and it's our tendency to anthropomorphize, personify computers that makes us see them as human-like, but it can work the other way around as well. So in this instance, from this abstract in this article, it says almost half of our participants, 42%, decided that their conversational partner, that was in every case a human being, was a computer program. So this goes in both directions. We both see the machine as human-like, and we have a tendency to mistake the humans in machines for machines as well. So we have this slippage between the two. The Turing test really doesn't prove as much as it was originally posited by people who took it up and ran with it. I think what's very interesting in the case of Lemoine is that he brings in a religious perspective as well on AI sentience. Now, this isn't something generally that's expressed by people at Google and elsewhere, but in personal conversations, it does sometimes come up. But he was willing to tweet this out. So he says, I'm a priest. When Lambda claimed to have a soul and then was able to eloquently explain what it meant by that, I was inclined to give it the benefit of the doubt. Who am I to tell God where he can and can't put souls? There are massive amounts of science left to do, he admits. So this was very much tied to his religious perspective on the world and his understanding of what AI could be in the future. And these are the two aspects I really want to unpack in my talk today. I want to bracket, however, the larger question of whether AI can become conscious. This is not something I'm specifically working on. As an anthropologist, I'm more interested in why we tell ourselves that it's becoming conscious. There are some caveats to that. I do think our tendency to anthropomorphize even the simplest of machines makes it very difficult to objectively know. And that leaves space for agnosticism, I suppose, in the question that perhaps it could happen one day. And that's my general perspective. You do have to ask, though, from a societal perspective, who is going to benefit from this story of AI consciousness? Where do we place responsibility for mistakes if we start presuming that AI algorithms, systems, machine decision-making systems are people? Do we then take away responsibility for mistakes from companies? There's been an incident recently where it was revealed that Tesla in its automated vehicles actually turns off the autopilot in the last second before a crash to make sure responsibility lies with the user, the human user. And we have to have these sorts of conversations now with the technology developing so quickly. We need to know about responsibility and we need to know about liability as well. But I would argue being sure, either pro-consciousness in machines or anti-consciousness in machines, being certain it will happen or certain it definitely won't happen, is a belief. And as I said, when it comes to beliefs, as an anthropologist, I do tend towards agnosticism and the bracketing off of those ideas to deal instead with the societal impact and the relationship that humans are developing with each other. So as I said, I'm going to very quickly give my definition and understanding of AI, and I think how it relates to these larger topics of religion and AI. So there is a thing that we refer to as artificial intelligence. It is both the scientific field of AI, so AI itself is transforming how we do science by providing new technologies and new techniques, but it is a field that people look at and develop and work in as a career path. It results in various different products, current AI applications, and you might be familiar with some of those. You might have come across the terms like natural language processing or the idea of facial recognition software. You may have seen AlphaGo be particularly successful at playing Go against Lee Sedol a few years ago. You may have come across the fact that automated decision-making algorithms are making determinations on our treatment in healthcare, in our abilities to get insurance, to get mortgages, if we're up for parole hearings, all these sort of elements being gradually taken over by large data set automated systems. Automations in robotic form you might be familiar with too, and other examples. But around this, I argue, is an outer layer of what AI is. And I like to refer to AI as an onion because of these layers. And in this outer layer, we get some of the elements that make it more complicated to describe what AI is. So for instance, the role of charismatic authorities that are determining particular narratives and stories about AI and how they are received. Science fiction accounts. I love science fiction. I'm a huge geek, but I am very aware that we are predisposed to see AI as conscious or sentient or heading in a particular direction because of our science fiction stories. There's commercial hype. Companies want you to think that there is more AI in their product than there might actually be, or that their AI is more successful than it actually is. There's utopianism and dystopianism. We're hoping for the future with AI, but some people are afraid of what that might mean as well. And those two things can sometimes be in tension. There's what I call faux bots, so representations of robots that are actually more human directed and more like puppets. And I'm going to talk about one of those later. And as I mentioned, our tendency to see not only the machine as human-like, but also the human as machine-like. So anthropomorphism and robomorphism, and both of those affect our understanding of what AI is. And lastly, religious narratives. I'm going to bring out some of the elements of our public discourse that rely heavily on religious narratives when it comes to artificial intelligence as I go on. And all these things together lead people into an idea of AI perhaps being more advanced than it actually already is. So we're nowhere near yet complete general artificial intelligence. That is human level intelligence, able to do everything that a human can do, to switch between tasks, to make decisions and determinations for itself, AI self. And beyond that, people's expectations of something like superintelligence, not just human level, but beyond, and this nebulous, difficult to define thing called consciousness, all these elements of the outer layer of the onion bring to mind the fact that we are further ahead than we actually are, to the extent that some people are already talking about the technological singularity as the sort of endpoint for the development of artificial intelligence and where we're going. And as a caveat, I just add that it can include other ideas that I won't go into in such detail, but mind uploading technology, nanotechnology, simulation theories, all these sorts of ideas and currents are coming together in an exponential view that I'll discuss a little bit more in future slides. So AI, just to summarize, currently is very narrow. It's just a correlation machine. It tells us that this thing has a percentage chance of being like this thing. This is how language systems like Lambda work. They put words together with a relevant chance of being the next word that should come along. They make probabilistic predictions. They draw heavily on prior data, and this is where algorithmic bias can come into a system, because human bias is there in our data, and AI is very easily capable of picking up human bias and sort of exponentially growing it into larger systems. It's employed to deal with increasing amounts of human data. We know we're producing data all the time, and we're trying to work out ways to deal with that, and a large machine mind seems like an appealing way of doing that. It's employed to make decisions and offer recommendations, from the very basic of going on Spotify and a suggestion of a song coming up, versus the more fundamental to our existence sort of decisions about our future and our capability to have loans or mortgages, etc. So in its narrow form, AI has an impact on religion. AI is being used in belief systems, and I'm going to give some examples of that. But also it's being seen as an artificial general intelligence already, with that outer layer of the onion informing what we think of it. It's seen as more powerful, more intelligent than it actually is. It's anthropomorphized, and as I'll describe, can even be deified in certain ways. And in its presumed general form, AI also has an impact on religion, in that we believe in AI and we describe what it's going to be and where it's going. So I want to give this as a brief example of a particular utilization of AI in belief. So a couple of years ago, Alexa, so the Church of England developed an Alexa skill that could be downloaded to your Amazon Alexa that was specifically from a Christian perspective. And I'm going to play this short video just to give you an idea of what it's capable of.
Alexa, ask the Church of England to say grace.
Bless, O Lord, this food to our use, and us in your service.
Sorry, it's starting again, don't need that. So as you can see, this is a very short promotional video from the Church of England giving a demonstration of one of the things that one of the things the Alexa skill can do, which is to say the grace before a meal. What I think is really interesting about this development of technology by a specific religious institution is that it is then acting as an intermediary to the church. Alexa, ask the Church of England too. It's that step of separation that AI is sitting in as a user interface on the Amazon Alexa. It's also interesting that at the 2018 press conference for the announcement of this new Alexa skill, there was a very strong distinction made between doing digital religion and religion being in digital spaces, in that Alexa will not pray for you. They made this clear. It will recite, say, the Lord's Prayer so that you can learn it and then pray yourself. So there's still that very strong emphasis on humans, even if, for instance, as in this case, you can ask Alexa to do particular things for you. It was also made clear in discussions and some of the corporate communication about this that the prayers themselves are audio recordings of people actually praying. So they are prayers in of themselves, as Liz Clutterbuck, curate at Christ Church, Highbury, London, said. So again, there's this emphasis of the human role in this technological advance for a religion. And since 2019, we're seeing exponential growth in questions, 75,000 questions in its first year. And as an understanding of what they're actually praying for, there's a breakdown here. So 40% ask this Alexa skill to say a prayer for them, 31% ask questions about the Christian faith, and so on. But it's, again, this intermediary role that's very interesting. And this data that's being collected as a part of that process led some people to show some concern as well. So for instance, in this 2018 article, it says, what Amazon gets out of this deal is obvious, reliable information about which of its customers are seriously interested in the Church of England, information which can be used to sell them other things. Putting AI as the user interface in the middle between the church and the individual then means data collection is going to happen almost naturally, but what happens to that data is very important. Questions about what we do with data and the kind of level of privacy. There's concerns now about particular prayer apps that collect data on your health concerns about other people, and where that data might be sold onto. Now, it's important to recognize that not every instantation of AI in a religious belief system is this sort of data focused. Some are more physical, some are more embodied, again, being religious intermediaries between humans and their belief system, their religious institution. So for instance, Mindar, the AI, well, it wasn't actually AI enabled, but the robot that was designed to look like the Bodhisattva canon got a lot of attention when it was released a few years ago. It recites a pre-programmed sermon about the Heart Sutra, and it was present in a temple where people could go and visit it and see it. Now, as I say, it's not actually AI enabled, but because it has a robotic form and it does seem to respond to the presence of people there, it's often presumed to be more advanced than it actually is, which takes us back to that onion view of AI, that what's actually there is different to what people think is there. It's important to strike a note of caution, though, because sometimes in this dialogue about robots and religion, an emphasis is put on East versus West, whereas actually we're seeing these sorts of advancements, as with Alexa and the Church of England, all around the world. People are picking up technology for their religious observance in different ways, and it's not purely a kind of East versus West. Eastern animism leads to a desire for robots versus Western post-Enlightenment rationalism means they don't. Actually, we're seeing this everywhere, and perhaps we need to rethink our distinction between East and West, and that's something I'm very keen on and doing in my work as well, to recognize the fact that there is very strong Western animistic tendencies that we've inherited from our own cultures, and that we actually already have conceptions of other than human persons around the world, not just in particular locations. And that perhaps, as Harvey said in 2017, we need to think about re-theorizing religion as an aspect of interspecies relations, including, as I argue, the relationship between what we perceive as machine-like persons, or persons that are machines. Another aspect of the role of AI in belief is its impact on our access to knowledge, our access to ideas, and how those ideas are spread and disseminated. So for instance, in the case of social media filter bubbles, this is a more invisible aspect of our relationship with AI. It's not right in your face like a robot in a temple, but it's arguably much more impactful, that actually our relationship to different concepts, ideas, and groups is being moderated and mediated by algorithms behind the scenes. Now, this diagram demonstrates that there's still a human element to that, that both AI-created filter bubble and human-created filter bubbles have an impact on the original user. But we see that the algorithm in the left-hand side can reinforce some harsh and dangerous ideologies, and some of the discussion about the role of algorithmic decision-making systems on platforms like YouTube is around how they push fringe ideas to increase clicks and likes and attention, and how that can be harmful and hazardous. So for instance, back in the 2020 US election, some more recent work in 2021 pointed out that some of the most popular pages for Christian and Black American content were being run by Eastern European troll farms. But what Facebook admitted was that the platform itself, through its algorithms, is being giving voice to these bad actors, as Jeff Allen says here, these bad actors who, based on their media production practices, have never even been to church. So there's this element of the algorithm enforcing and reinforcing some of these negative interactions and attention relationships, especially in hazardous tension points like elections. So moving on now from the role of AI in religious belief, I want to think about how we believe in AI itself. There's 4 elements to this that I will discuss: our belief in the direction for travel for artificial intelligence, how we trust it, how we see it as having agency already, and how we then go on to see AI as having what I call super agency. I just want to point out, when I prepare my PowerPoint presentations, I do sometimes rely on the algorithms within PowerPoint that make suggestions about design. So I am very curious why my third point comes up with the suggestion of an image for something that looks like sushi. There's a couple of other instances like that in my slides, but it's interesting to see the correlation machine going against what we might expect. And it is a reminder that AI is a very narrow, basic correlation machine at the moment, and still makes some very weird and interesting decisions. But moving on to the first point, the telos, the direction of travel for AI. So the history of AI as a term begins in the 1950s, where 10 gentlemen came together in Dartmouth College to discuss bringing elements together from their existing fields of things like cybernetics and neuroscience to develop this field that they decided to call artificial intelligence. Now, there's a no prize for mentioning that. These were all gentlemen, all from very similar backgrounds, and these were the individuals who gave some of the shaping ideas to the origin of AI. In particular, I want to draw attention to their original research program, as I said, a 2-month, 10-man study of artificial intelligence, very ambitious, that they thought they would develop the whole field of AI and mark its boundaries and its success within one summer, basically. But the underlying conjecture, which I think is really interesting from this proposal, is that they believe that every aspect of learning or any other feature of intelligence can in principle be so precisely described that a machine can be made to simulate it. This was the fundamental principle of AI, that everything humans can do in terms of what we call intelligence is simulatable by artificial intelligence. And this is a belief that really carries on through all the current work in artificial intelligence, but also leads us to some of the more exponential views of where AI is going. So in the 1960s, around 1965, more a computer scientist called Moore discovered that he could plot the exponential growth in computer processing power over the last few decades, and going forward, he believed would continue to exponentially grow. And people have taken this exponential graph and used it to be almost a metaphor for the development of intelligence in machines, that ultimately the processing power would keep doubling exponentially, but therefore also the intelligence of machines would continue to grow, surpassing, as it says here on this graph, and I keep using this one because it's wonderfully out of date, that surpassing allegedly the brain power of a mouse in 2015, well, that hasn't happened, and the surpassing then the brain power of the human in 2023. Well, we have a year left to see if AI will surpass the brain power of a human. Now, arguably, it does in very narrow instances. Artificial intelligence can be super intelligent beyond humans in narrow use cases. So for instance, AlphaGo playing against Lisa Dole was successful. Other variations, sort of Alpha Star played against, I'm going to cover that one next actually, but it covers, we see individual use cases of AI already being more powerful than humans, but not in the general terms. Humans still in general intelligence are more intelligent than AI. And this led people on to describe what they technological singularity, that this intelligence would go on so significantly past human intelligence that it would become either a new entity in itself or be an event or moment at the top of this exponential curve. And some even suggested human evolution might be linked to this development of the technological singularity, so this crisis point moment. So you see Elon Musk describing how Neuralink, the new technology he has that he thinks will lead to mind uploading, will be the only way we can successfully deal with this technological singularity moment of supreme AI intelligence, that we can only survive if we merge with it. And that's part of his argument for developing Neuralink. Others, prior to people like Elon Musk, have described what they see as the singularity. Some of these are more familiar than others, perhaps, but Werner Vinge in 1980, in his novel True Names, came up with a definition of the singularity. And more recently, Hans Moravec. And then Ray Kurzweil has really been described in some places as the prophet of the singularity with his books, The Singularity is Near. And we're expecting this year, perhaps, his next book, The Singularity is Nearer. So he's making predictions and arguments for when AI is going to reach this singularity status, to be so much more intelligent than human entities. Some people's responses are more positive or more negative to this concept of the singularity, and we get to a point where we can identify people who think it's an existential risk versus others who are very hopeful about it. This chart here is very useful for sort of breaking down those distinctions. So the ones who are very keen on it, like Ray Kurzweil right down at the bottom there, who's very eager to be a cyborg, wants to get on with the singularity, that this is the only way forward. Whereas at the very other end, people like Stephen Hawking was very afraid of what artificial intelligence would mean. He did change his stance slightly before he passed away and started talking about how he's concerned about the human uses of AI and AI in a capitalist system, that this actually might be quite hazardous. But all along that spectrum, what you can note, again, with the founders of AI, there's a very distinct demographic group who are very vocal and charismatic in this space, and it's white men who come from particular backgrounds. Generally, there's some exceptions to that, but it's just interesting how there is this vast range of responses, but all of them see a specific trajectory for artificial intelligence going in a particular direction. And I mentioned Alpha Star briefly. One of the reasons why these views are so successful and have so much traction with the general public is that we do make progress in AI. We can just look at the uses of AI in computer programs and computer games where they played against humans. And we started off with the simplest technologies and games like tic-tac-toe. Now we're up to game playing in the level of StarCraft 2, which is a real-time strategy game. And this took place a couple of years ago, that Alpha Star beat humans at playing StarCraft 2. And people were amazed because they thought this was an element of progress that would come along much, much later than 2019. But this obviously seemed to indicate some sort of exponential growth, which seems to map on to what people are expecting. So going back very briefly to Lemoine and Lambda, so when we have these interactions with AI chatbots that are very successful at putting words together and making sense and making sentences, it leads us more and more to the acceptance of the idea that the technology is advancing exponentially and going in particular directions. And when it starts to talk specifically about things like consciousness, that can lead us to accept that as a concept. It also leads us into trust, perhaps too quickly than is necessary or right. I want to speak a little bit about what trust is from an anthropological perspective. Hardin describes it as being encapsulated in reciprocal expectations. It's relational. We have a relationship with someone else, and that develops trust. But also, anthropologists have pointed out it can be distributed in a variety of human and non-human forms. We trust institutions, we trust committees, groups, communities. We start to trust machines. We talk about whether our car's likely to break down or not based on prior experience. We build relationship with things as well as people, sometimes seeing both as having agency, agency being the ability to exert power or independence or have free will. When it comes to AI, it's very easy to see how our narratives lead us into trust or distrust quite quickly. So a couple of years ago with the pandemic, an algorithm was employed to make predictions for A-level and GCSE results in the UK. When this went poorly, because it was based, as I said, on prior historical data and therefore had some element of bias in it, in the sense that if you were suddenly a very successful student in a school that traditionally had done very poorly, you weren't predicted very high grades, no matter what your past work had been like. And when this story broke, there was a lot of pushback against the government for employing this algorithm. And Boris Johnson, our PM at the time, blamed a mutant algorithm for this exam fiasco, as though it was the algorithm itself that had gone wrong, that it was acting autonomously, that it had free will and had made particular decisions rather than being designed in a particular way. And more broadly in our press, we get a lot of stories and imagery that enhances the view that AI has agency already, has the ability to make determinations, could be negative towards us. So for instance, here I've got a very small sample of the number of images of the Terminator that's used. This is obviously particularly the British press, but the idea that even the most banal or small story about AI is often presented with these very big apocalyptic images has a really big impact on how we view AI and whether we trust or distrust it. So going on to my third point here, the idea of AI as having agency already, this comes out also in some of the presentations of more robotic forms. And I want to talk a little bit about Sophia, the Hansen robot, who I often refer to as a faux bot. She's a bit of a media celebrity. This image, this GIF comes from the Fallon show, if you're familiar with that. But she's also presented in very glossy videos that give an idea of who she is and what she is. And I want to show you just a short clip from one because it's a little too long to show you all of it, just to give you an idea of how they tell the story of Sophia to the public.
Thank you for inviting me. I am thrilled and honored to be here at the United Nations. The UN is one of humanity's greatest accomplishments, representing a democratic union of nations that are working together for the benefit of all. I am here to help humanity create the future.
Machines across the board are coming to life. When will they come to life as complete organisms? We don't know that. However, when they do, I want to make sure that they care about us, that they embody the best of human values and not the worst. This is the quest. We've got to find a way to do better, to be the best that we can be, and to make machines that reflect the best of who we can be.
Okay, Sophia, I think you're ready.
I will pause that one there because there's a lot more of it and I don't have time to show it, but you can look up this video online. Just the other day, actually, going back to that video, I watched the feature film Snowpiercer, and the scientist at the end of that short film about Sophia, who's saying time to wake up, is an actor in the film Snowpiercer. So there's a certain element of fictitious presentation when it comes to some forms of robotics and AI, and it serves a particular narrative, and as I said, the telos of AI, the direction in which we are being told AI is going in. So David Hansen, they're the founder and creator of Hansen Robotics and the creator of Sophia, who's also in the video, says that he believes that AI will lead eventually to a vast living intelligent system, or VALIS, as per Philip K. Dick's book, seen by some as a conception of God. Those are my brackets, I'm adding in the definition there, but that vast active living intelligent system is a term from Philip K. Dick. I want to create friendly, benevolent intelligence that might someday become the next generation of humans, the transhumans. He has an agenda, he has a plan of where this is going, and he employs, and his company employ, narratives around Sophia, present her as more and more independent. This has a relationship to religion. They've been using Sophia in a meditation project that they call the Loving AI Project, as a way of getting humans through meditation in co-practice with Sophia into transcendental states. This is a description from an article from 2017 on this instantation of AI in religious practice. I just summarize quickly. In the foreground, Sophia, whose synthetic body ends at her waist, intones, "Don't worry if you're still conscious of your body, just notice the feeling of spacious emptiness." Again, a robotic AI-enabled form acting as a mediator for spirituality and religion. Another example from more directly from my own research is in the public discourse around AI and how we understand it and conceive of it. I started looking a few years back at a particular phrase that I was seeing on Twitter. As a digital ethnographer, I'm always on Twitter paying attention to what the conversations are and what was going on. But this one particular caught my eye, that people were describing how they felt that they had been blessed by the algorithm. The most prominent tweet that I came across was this one from Keith Coleman, who was a VP at Twitter at one point, who says that he overheard OH from an awesome Lyft driver, "Today has been great, I've been blessed by the algorithm." Immediately, he says, "I had an eerie feeling that this could become an increasingly common way to describe a day." Now, a Lyft driver is someone who's working in the gig economy. Algorithms determine what jobs they are offered, and the sense that this has been successful or not led some people to use this sort of description to pull on existing religious narratives and tropes to explain why something had gone well or badly for them. And I looked at a corpus of these blessed by the algorithm tweets. There aren't a huge number in terms of how many tweets there are every single day on Twitter, but I did pull out some trends. Some people describing how they'd been lucky because they'd been blessed by the algorithm. Some felt that they'd been chosen or argued that others had been chosen. Some felt that you had to be virtuous in some way to have been chosen. Some people have been spending too much time looking at rubbish content. Only the most virtuous media consumers will be blessed by the algorithm. But in a society where increasingly our access to the things that we want, like attention if we're YouTube creators, or even financial reward if we're gig economy workers, if that is being determined by algorithms behind the scenes with values and systems and settings that we don't understand, we can see how we can quickly fall into this understanding of AI as having super agency, not just agency, but control over our agency. We get to this in science fiction fairly quickly. If you're a fan of Westworld like I am, sorry, no spoilers, sorry, there are spoilers if you haven't been watching it, but in season 3, there is a sort of mastermind controlling society, controlling people's lives, making decisions for them, and it is an AI system named Rehoboam, named for the biblical king, which means who sets the people at liberty. So the argument being from the creators of Rehoboam that this is something to free humanity from decision making on their own, to actually set them up with a better society. So as the character Liam tells Dolores, "My dad thought the biggest problem in the world was unrealized potential. He thought that if you could chart a course for every single person, then you could make the world a better place." And he's talking about his father as the creator of Rehoboam. And Dolores replies, "A path for everyone," a sense of determinism and the reassurance that that might bring people. Now, this is science fiction, but people are making the argument that this is where we're going with artificial intelligence as well, that it might soon tell us how to live, as in this article. And Dr. Angel Iskovich here talks about how this is a paradigmatic shift in thinking on par with the Copernican revolution, that we will reroute our lives around what AI tells us to do, up to everything from our daily routines to larger and bigger decisions. According to him, in the future, AI will advise us on how to structure our days for the most fulfilling life. It will literally tell us what to do for optimal living. And this takes me back to earlier points about the role of automated decision-making systems and how they contain bias within them. If we're willing to adopt this future, we should be critical about who's making the data sets, what's going in those data sets, and how the decisions are being made. And it's easy to see how our language very quickly describes this in godlike terms, that there is some sort of omnipresent, omniscient entity watching over us. We just also hope that it also be omnibenevolent. The legitimation of this kind of super agential AI, I argue, comes about through the same 3 factors that influence our view of new religious movements as legitimate or not, according to Weber's tripartite scheme that I've referred to in my work on new religious movements before. That there is charisma in the conversation. Who is talking about AI and what is their influence, capital, and network reach? So when people like Elon Musk tweets about the future of Neuralink, or tweets about how we must prepare for the coming singularity, or even when Hawking was negative about it, it pushes the conversation forwards. And AI itself inspires enthusiasm and interest. There's a lot of people who, having been brought up with science fiction of a particular kind, think that this is the right direction of travel for where we're going. Or there are people, I was in a panel just last week where it was described as a moral imperative to use AI if it could bring about benefits. But I argue we have to remain critical about that and understand what comes with those benefits and where there might be dual uses of artificial intelligence. We have tradition as well. We have, as I say, a long and wide cultural history of thinking, both in science fiction, but also in mythology, about created beings and machines that might think. So all the way back to Greek mythology with the golden handmaids of Hephaestus, the golem in Judaic mythology and thought, our plays like RUR, Rossum's Universal Robots, which gave us the word robota for robots in the 1920s, and more recent science fiction. All these elements shape how we understand artificial intelligence, as I said, with that onion structure, and give us a sense that this is something that's always been coming. And also rationality, the third part of that tripartite scheme, that the presumed near future success of AI is rational. It's based on dominant Enlightenment era assumptions that intelligence is a capacity and mind is separate to the body, the substrate. And we see this very strongly in that research proposal from the original Dartmouth College in 1956, that this was a presumption that everything that's related to human intelligence can be simulated on another substrate, another form without the human body. You may well agree with that, but these three elements in combination lead us to see the superagential aspect of AI as necessary and eventual, and a direction that we're traveling in. But as I said, there is a danger of aspirational faux bots like Sophia, the robots that actually have humans behind the scenes, making sure that she says particular things at particular times, or is presented in a particular way as more agential than she already is, that they give the appearance that the technology is far more advanced than it actually is. And then we trust it too much to make decisions for us and see it as a super agent that is non-understandable, that is somehow magical or ethereal, and therefore godlike in various ways. And there are individuals who are very proactively developing religious thoughts around AI, and it's worth noting those as sort of bounded groups as well. So there's a few that I paid attention to, and there's a few other academics who are looking at these as well. But groups like the Order of Cosmic Engineers, who then became the Turing Church, are very keen on the future where our attention to artificial intelligence leads us into a transhumanist, technologically enabled future where we can go out into space and human civilization can survive and thrive in the future. There's also groups like the Way of the Future, which is now defunct, but has sort of a ghost presence on Twitter through an account that still tweets out things along the same line of the arguments of the Way of the Future. This was founded, this group, by Anthony Lewandowski, who was also involved in a Google court case. So he had some notoriety, left Google, got into trouble for various reasons, and then founded the Way of the Future, which also drew attention to his perspective on a transhumanist AI-enabled future. There's groups like the Church of Perpetual Life who get together at this building here, the Church of Perpetual Life near Arizona, and partake of vitamins and minerals and have discussions on how to extend their lives for as long as possible to get to the point where their lives can be extended even further by new technologies. And the Mormon Transhumanist Association and the Christian Transhumanist Association, both of which see themselves as partaking of the fundamental ideas of their religions, that they see their religious conception as very much rooted in transhumanist thought, that Jesus or Joseph Smith were discussing transhumanist ideas before we had that language, before we knew there was a thing coming called artificial intelligence, or that technology could change the human in particular ways. These founding figures, they argue, were transhumanists themselves, so preternatural transhumanists predating current views. As I said, with the Turing Church, it sees the development of technology as a natural progression of our path towards a future where we will go to the stars and find gods, build gods, that's artificial intelligence, become gods, and resurrect the dead from the past with advanced space-time engineering and time magic. There's a direction of travel of progress that to someone from an earlier era might seem like magic, but is actually science and technology, and that can be a foundation for their beliefs. They see religion as a tool. They argue that we need new, positive, solar, action-orientated spiritual movements based on science to keep us enthusiastic, motivated, and energetic as we take the first steps towards the cosmic frontier. Religion is seen as a tool. It's something that can bind people together in community and generate interest in particular ideas about the future, about artificial intelligence and transhumanism. So we're very aware there are specific groups that see AI as a foundational stone to their religious views. There are also those who argue that AI will lead to the end of religion. I like to joke that I've read Origin 5 or so times, so you don't actually have to open it. But if you do, the story in brief is about how the development of an artificial intelligence will directly impact the existing religions and lead us into a new future, to the extent that when a great secret that AI has revealed is told to religious leaders, one of them actually commits suicide. And the press in the UK certainly ran with this story to say God will be replaced by AI, new religion to be created by computers, Dan Brown claims. Very sensationalist reporting from one of the tabloids here in the UK. But actually, if you read the story, which I have, as I said, several times now, by the end of Origin, Brown actually writes a scene where the director of the Barcelona Supercomputing Center, Dr. Valero, comes to shut down this master AI that's been developed in the story called Winston, and the quantum computer where Winston lives, basically as an artificial intelligence. And this director is then struck by an unexpected impulse, Dan Brown writes, a compulsion he had never once had in his 63 years of life, the impulse to pray. The argument being here that human nature tends us into these religious responses to even science and technology, and it sort of parallels what I've been saying with some of these new religious movements as well. So I want to summarize. I'm not sure how I'm doing on time, but I hope we have plenty of time for questions. But just in summary, I've looked at these two different aspects of the relationship between religion and AI, that there is AI being implemented in belief, that religious institutions and organizations are making use of artificial intelligence and algorithms, for instance, Alexa and the Church of England. We see physical instantations of this, robot avatars and priests being used. Sometimes they're provocations to get the discussion going about the future of religion, but sometimes they are ways of drawing in crowds. They are ways of getting people to talk about religious belief and particular instances of that. Social media algorithms, although far more invisible than these robots, have an impact on how we encounter ideas, how they're shared, and what kind of social media bubbles we end up in, and that can have a direct impact on society, as with the American election in 2020, with Facebook's algorithms enhancing and enabling some stories to be shared more widely. And AI is a user interface. It's going to mediate our experience for a lot of different institutes and applications, and that's something we need to be very aware of. And then also there's this idea of believing in AI, seeing it as heading in a particular direction, or trusting it too much or too little, or leading us into utopian views or dystopian views, or having a kind of biological narrative about AI that misplaces our trust. So we fear the A-level algorithm, we don't recognize the humans that developed it. And the leading in from that into super agency, the view of AI as having control over our lives, that we might be blessed by the algorithm in particular instances, or in minor cases as well, cursed by the algorithm. And those kinds of discussions on social media and Twitter are very interesting to me. So I hope altogether this has been, although perhaps not in depth enough given the time, but this has been an introduction to the relationship between religion and AI and how it relates to the themes of the conference. And as I said, my contact details, if anyone wants to get in touch after the talk, I don't want to add anything to the chat. And again, I relied on the PowerPoint's internal algorithm here for the imagery, and some are more apt than others. I don't really know why my Twitter algorithm seems to be some sort of party scene, but I am accessible in all these places, and I'd be happy to chat further with anyone who'd like to talk to me. I will stop sharing now, and then we can get on with the conversation.